Anotherway, Erasmus Plus Program, Cooperation for Innovation and the Exchange of Good Practices, Ka2 Strategic Partnership for Europe, funded by EU, number 2019-2-IT 03-Ka205-016466. Co-funded by the Erasmus Plus program of the European Union. Mediterranea. Associazione per lo sviluppo locale. This work is licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0 International License. To view a copy of this license, visit http://creativecommons.org or send a letter to Creative Commons, P.O. Box 1866, Mountain View, CA 94042, USA. Per altra via. Anotherway. An original method by Francesco Piccolo.
Module 4. Per altra via, another way. Lessons 5 and 6. The plot. The definition of the theme opens up to what is the most creative and complex phase of planning a Per altra via, another way tour. If it were a book, it would be the moment when we must define the plot and the number of chapters in which we want the novel to be divided. What kind of novel do we want to do? A short novel to read on the subway? Or a 700-page tome? How do we prefer to proceed? Writing as much as possible in order to make the necessary cuts? Or in a targeted way by defining the chapters in broad lines? These are two ways, both valid, to proceed. But in a vision of resource optimization, it is useful to decide if you want to make a half-day tour which lasts about 3 hours, or on the contrary, a full-day tour that can last 6 hours and must also include a meal. I opened Pandora's box. Defining the duration and consequently also the number of chapters it has the legs of our tour is not easy. On the one hand, there is the enthusiasm to want to visit as many monuments as possible. We want to make our tourist know as many things as possible. We want to make him fall in love with our land. On the other hand, a too insistent courtship can get tired. So, a tour too long may not be successful, precisely because maybe the tourists do not have this time. So what if we are lucky? The tour is on commission from an agency or other tourist board. So we just must follow the client's requests. If, on the other hand, we must decide, it's a bit more complex. Personally, I suggest developing two itineraries, one longer and the other shorter, starting from the same theme. I would like to underline that both share the same territory, the theme, perhaps a few legs, but they are two different itineraries, precisely because time decides their duration and rhythm. For this reason, a half-day tour is not simply the full-day tour, but with half of the things to visit, or with the performances of each leg halved in time. I use a metaphor to explain myself better. Let's think of a rose. In the middle has its bud, and around a series of petals. The greater the number of petals, the more it will seem to have blossomed. And yet, if it doesn't have its bud, if it is too open, we sense that it will soon wither. The bud is our theme, and the petals are our legs. We can therefore have a fully bloomed rose or not fully bloomed. They are both beautiful, but picked at different times. We can, starting from the same theme, bud, produce a full day or half-day itinerary. Both, however, will have a certain number of petals legs. I'm writing a certain number because this has to be decided according to the content of the tour, the amount of chapters that are needed to deal with the theme. Usually,
no less than 4 legs or 8 performances. I'm talking about legs and performances because it's possible that a certain artistic site may require more performances to be done, and therefore more time. If, for example, we include the city's cathedral in our tour, it is likely that it will need to be experienced. 1. The square in front. 2. The facade. 3. The baptistry, if present and useful. 4. Some altars and works of art in the interior. The leg is the same, but the performances, that is, the activities related to the things to be experienced, are at least 4, as you read. However, I repeat that these numbers are approximate of a minimum threshold. What is certain is that for each leg is at least 1 performance. What does the word performance mean in the Peraltra Via Anotherway context? Exactly what the Cambridge Dictionary means: the action of entertaining other people by dancing, singing, acting, or playing music. Each of the actions contained in the definition can be part of a Peraltra Via Anotherway tour. I have been saying this for a long time. It is not a descriptive method, but an experiential one. In our tours, nothing is left to chance. Even the guide has lyrics to prepare you to follow. Maybe they are just sketched as a canvas, but they are there anyway. Why? If we want a scent, a taste, a music, a tactile experience to act, we must prepare the context within which that particular stimulus can act on the mind, can solicit an emotional response from our tourist, because we know the role played by emotions in engraving memories and how they become part of the identity. If we want the tourist to remember our city, we must make sure that he or she has emotions when visiting it. This does not mean getting lost in pathetic rivulets of tenderness, but creating balanced and well-organized performances. As I pointed out in the forum, the evocative power of music is great. Precisely for this reason, we will use it sparingly, and when the other senses cannot experience what we want. So, even the scenes that most lead to memories must be dosed, or the touch that could remain on the surface of things alone. We handle fragile material, that is, the sensitivity of our tourists. We must take care of it. The risk, exaggerating, is to get bored or create an emotional short circuit. That's why performances must be tested individually and then as a whole. This test also makes it possible to verify how long the performance lasts. How can you calculate that 8 performances are equivalent to a half-day tour? Usually, each performance has an average running time of 15 minutes. 15 per 8 is equal to 120 minutes, 2 hours, and the remaining hour is used for initial instructions and to move from one leg to another. We always talk about average times. They are approximate values. There will be the performance that will take 5 minutes and the one that will take 16. The important thing is that everything is balanced. The number of tourists, for example, affects the duration of the performance and therefore the tour. This number of tourists per tour cannot exceed 15 participants, especially if there are blindfolded people among them. The tour requires the presence of 2 guides
or one guide and one assistant. In the exceptional case that the number of 15 participants must be exceeded, it is necessary, for safety reasons, to include the third operator, a guide or an assistant. The guide will obviously be trained according to our method and will have the instructions with him, her. I have specified the condition of blindfolded sighted people because they have more difficulty in orienting themselves and being guided, so they must be given the necessary time. From my experience, the optimal number is 10 participants, whether they are blindfolded or blind, with the support of two operators, guide or assistant and guide. The definition of performance is wide enough to include all those experiences that we want the tourist to make: smell, taste, touch, listen. To these, I add the dramatization. It has to make the participants take some positions with their bodies. Our performances do not have an artist and a spectator, but they are built together with those who enjoy them. They are designed with the involvement of each participant in mind. The creative work required by each performance is not replicable, cannot be taught or learned. What can be useful instead are the parameters and aims with which to design each performance. We have already mentioned the involvement of the participants. The immediacy of execution is another parameter. The gestures, the activities must be simple so that no one has difficulty in execution. The impact must be deep but not shocking. It's worth what we said about the music. The immediate meaning is that it can be traced back to the theme of the tour and the work of art, to the artifact to which
it refers. It can involve several senses at the same time, considering that almost always the guide's voice will occupy the auditory canal. The starting point for each is the analysis of the work, as described in Module 3. Once the lines and vectors have been obtained, once the investigation of the history in the work has been concluded, about the history that inspired the work, and finally the history of the work itself, we can condense this information and make it flow into a single performance that returns this information to the tourist, giving the possibility to mentalize a work that he does not see, creating a mental image of this work. I'll try to give you an example, even if by rereading my feedback to your assignments, you should have already intuited something. I decided to do a tour in Venice. The theme is like fishes out of water. With this theme, which is also the title of the tour, I refer to the amazement of those who visit Venice, overwhelmed by its uniqueness and beauty, but also to the shape that the city takes on the map. It will be done in a gondola, typical boat of the city, so that you won't have any problems about the movements, which would be very complicated to do on land. The impact with the peculiarity of Water City is guaranteed. The involvement of local craftsmen, workers, is total. Where to start from? I would start from this. It is the iron, ferro, of the gondola, also called comb, pettine. I would ask everyone to touch this strange object placed on the bow of each gondola. And then I would explain that besides protecting the bow from possible collisions and balancing the weight of the gondolier, it is a representation of the city, a sort of synthetic and simplified map. The 6 teeth represent the 6 sestieri, quarters, of Venice: Cannaregio, Castello, Dorsoduro, San Marco, San Polo, and Santa Croce. The 7th tooth, that extends backwards towards the center of the gondola, indicates the Giudecca and the Doge's hut. The bow above the highest tooth of the comb represents the Rialto Bridge. The 3 leaves, instead, placed between the 6 teeth, represent the 3 most important islands of the Venetian lagoon: Murano, Burano, and Torcello. Let's analyze the performance. I requested the use of touch and hearing the guide's commentary. The action is simple, centered on the theme. Think of the amazement of knowing that an iron has so many meanings. Evocative and descriptive of the identity of the place. Each gondola can accommodate up to 5 participants, plus a guide. Each participant will have 3 minutes to explore the comb iron, 15 minutes in total. When designing a performance, we must also take into consideration its feasibility. We must wonder which material support we need, or rather, the tour guide will need. The material supports and the objects must have a small size, be easy to handle, with a certain resistance, but above all, light. Our guide will have to take them
with him, her, and we have to use them with easy, and unless he, she has Mary Poppins' magic suitcase, it is up to us, creators of the tour, to provide them.
Well, first things first. I always say the place to hang a hat is on a hat stand. Oh, this will never do. I much prefer seeing all of my face at the same time.
But there was nothing in it.
Never judge things by their appearance. Even carpet bags. I'm sure I never do. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. A little more light, perhaps.
We must think that everything you need can fit in a shopping trolley bag. It should also be borne in mind that the objects to be used should preferably be made by local craftsmen who have received instructions from us. It is clear how to excite and involve the craftsmen. So it is important not only from an ethical point of view. Their work makes our work easier. Let's go back to the example of the gondola iron. Clearly, we need the gondolier permission to make it touch by our participants, or we should have a copy made just for the occasion, but certainly not on a 1-to-1 scale, and not in metal. It would be too heavy. So, agree with the gondolier, or starting the tour from a square construction site where the gondolas are built, are the two feasible options. As you will notice, practical sense is as much our ally as creativity. Once conceived, the performance must be tested. A blindfolded and/or blind volunteer are our judges. They will tell us whether it works or not. They will tell us what helped them to create the idea of how much we made them experience and what makes the process difficult. It's up to us to make the necessary corrections. The texts that accompany the performances are the glue between the various legs and the lubricant of the gears of each performance. In fact, where the action jams, language helps to make it better and to make sense of it. Care must be taken in creating these texts. They must be synthetic as instructions for use, but poetic as a theatrical script. Synthesis is a skill that we have already learned to appreciate in assignments. Language has a connotative power. Let's use it. I would like to return to music as a universal language of enormous evocative and connotative power. How to choose the right music is a question that requires a lot of attention. Beyond copyright issues, which, as already said, are beyond my competence and require a knowledge of the legislation in your country, there is some attention to be paid. The melody does not have to be very well known. This is because the tourist must receive through it the message that we want to convey, not the inherent and already known message of the melody itself. Moreover, if the music is too recent or known, it is likely that the memories linked to it will interfere with our message, and the tourist will not pay attention. Unless they are folkloric songs, which therefore the tourist will hardly understand, it is always preferable to use instrumental music. This is because, again, the sung lyrics could interfere with the musical one. So what would remain for our message? There is, however, one exception. If the song describes exactly what is depicted in the painting, or is closely related to the work of art, you can try to use it, waiting for the verification whether to include it or not. Once we have identified the legs, conceived the performances, prepared the supporting materials, we must base our itinerary, just as we do with a dress, and prepare ourselves for the final test. In this lesson, the images are used for educational purposes only, and for the most part are original. Those for which it has been possible to identify the source are mentioned in the image itself. For the others, the author remains available to give credit to any rights holders who request it, using the following address: peraltravia@gmail.com.